Today, I want to go back and check out ChatGPT 4.5. Supposedly, they have also added, OpenAI has added more memory. So, meaning that ChatGPT should have a little bit more recall and kind of relevancy when it comes to discussions or information that's exchanged between you and the AI application. So what I want to do is demonstrate my workflow and kind of go into some of the use cases that you could use to create images, or you can create RPG content, or even write stories, whatever is required for your campaign or for your research. So this would apply to any rule set in Fantasy Grounds I have loaded right now. This is the latest version, 4.6.6. It is April 12th, 2025. And just so you know that the image of the browser that I have in Fantasy Grounds on the left, that is not a true Fantasy Grounds window. As you can see, my mouse cursor goes underneath it. It's just an overlay so it can blend in with the background better. So it's not an extension or any functionality of Fantasy Grounds. It's just how I chose to lay out the screen so it kind of blends in more naturally with what I'm doing. So we're going to make like a reference manual, or in this, which are now called books. So we're going to do something like that, but we're going to start off slow with some of the setup and some of the important things that you'll need to know first before we really get too deep into the Fantasy Grounds part. So I'm going to be working in ChatGPT first. So when I open this up, this window contains a design. It has instructions, so I want to open that up and show you what I put in here. And I said, refer to my documents for content creation. Use the tabletop RPG industry standards for adventure design and writing. Also use the Fantasy Grounds Virtual Tabletop platform's best practices and the Fantasy Grounds Atlassian guides for reference. Format with plain text without HTML markup, and use the full URL links and not just hyperlinks. I hate it when it does that. It always gives you a really nice hyperlink, but I actually want the full text if there is any to be needed. I want the voice to be professional, creative, and a useful tone for responding. Also, lean more upon the 2024 5e rule set. So that's kind of what this is pertaining to. So I'm going to hit save. So that's kind of the setup for your project. So I'm on the left-hand side under projects. Now, mind you, this is a paid version, so you may not have access. I have the Plus account, which is like around $20 a month. And then it also uploaded some templates. So there's a text file or a PDF that talks about how I traditionally want to create an adventure with the formatting and the layout. And basically what this is essentially the type of outline and the text formatting that I prefer. This leprechaun text is the latest and greatest version of a stat block for the 2024 5e rule set. And then I gave it an example of a rollable list, which is essentially a rollable table. And I do not say table, I always say list, because if I do say table, it wants to format it into a fancy looking text table, which I don't really need. I just need the text. I can import it into Fantasy Grounds to create a table just a lot quicker than trying to hand enter all of that text. So these are the project files. And if you had anything like this, you can upload them. I think there is a limit on the size. So if you're trying to upload a PDF with 300 pages, I don't think that's going to work. It has to be kind of I don't remember what the file size limit. I imagine it's like 30 megabytes or less. Some programs allow larger documents. So if you want something like that, I think you can get away with 200 megabytes if you use an application such as Google Notebook LM. But for the time being, this is ChatGPT 4.5. I was using Grok earlier, 3.0 beta. It works pretty good, but I'm going to see where we're at with the ChatGPT program. So those are the kind of the basics. Like, this is my starting point. So if anyone that's watching for the next few minutes wants a specific location, or maybe they want a specific genre, like horror or underdark or location like that, or whatever the theme is, let me know, and I'll start off with that. I've been working with AI tools, all different varieties, for images, for writing content. Trying to make tokens and maps is still pretty difficult. I mean, you can make some kind of cutesy ones that aren't really strategic battle maps, but it's very difficult to make a really good virtual tabletop map. And the moment you say map in your prompt, it's going to try to add the grid, and it's going to do all kinds of stuff that's probably not going to be helpful. And a lot of times the grid that it lays down is not accurate. So when you try to put it in Fantasy Grounds, it doesn't line up with anything. And they're actually more like uneven rectangles instead of actual true squares. So I try to stay away from the word map and just say I want a top-down image of a forest, do that, and then see if that comes out. But generally speaking, I don't really like making maps with AI tools. I don't think that usually doesn't work out well, unless you're doing like a regional map that really doesn't need a lot of line of sight or walls and such. And the other thing is the image quality has improved in ChatGPT. When you create images now, like fantasy RPG ones, it tends to look a lot better, like the storybook kind of variety. Before, it was trying to do a mixture of hyper realistic and 3D kind of animation style. I use what is that? I use Ideogram AI for that style. So if you want something more lifelike, that's what I use for that. But I noticed that the ChatGPT recently put out a nice update for images, so it's a little bit better quality. It can kind of maintain the style more. So if you want all your images to kind of look alike, like it's from the same author, it has that capability more so. It's still not quite perfect. So we're going to see how much fighting that I have to do with the application, but you can create images in here, which was updated. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff with ChatGPT now. I use ChatGPT as more like an overall kind of brainstorming, outlining, discussion type thing, and then I'll use like Grok or Anthropic's Sonnet for writing. But I want to give the new version of ChatGPT a whirl and see how it does. Usually I have to end up fighting it quite a bit, so we'll see what happens. So none of this stuff is perfect, and it all comes down to getting familiar with the application that you're using, the wording or the way that you ask for things, so you're prompting, and then also your expectations. So you don't want to expect perfection. You're not going to get that. And the other thing is, trying to control it is not really easy to do. You can keep asking it to do stuff until you're blue in the face, but it won't always give you exactly what you want. So what I found, my approach is to kind of work with it and just kind of gradually push it in the direction you want. The only problem with that is that you lose out on your iterations. So if you're using a free version, or if you're using a brand new feature, you'll run out of you'll run out of instances and you have to wait a while. So you have to kind of know what you're getting yourself into before you start. If you're just going to be experimenting and learning the application, that's fine. But once you're done with that and you really want to sit down and make something, you want to kind of use your experience, use other people's templates, whatever you need to do to kind of get an idea of what you're wanting. So for an instance, I'm going to bring up my, let's see, 5e. No, that's not what I want. So I have PDFs that I had made for myself, and I have distributed these out to others. So this is basically one template that I made for myself. And all it is just a way that I want Fantasy Grounds to be able to accept the content, and also I don't want a bunch of HTML and fancy lettering and stuff, because that stuff isn't required if you're doing copy and paste. You kind of want that to be as plain and as simple as possible. So that's why I said plain text only. So usually I want an introduction, background, adventure setup, that sort of stuff. And then part B will be like the adventure. So area 1, area 2, area 3, area 4, so this just gives it the impression and implies how I would like these things to be written. And then when you're all done with the adventure, like an outro, maybe aftermath, consequences, an ending, reward, experience, MVP for most valuable player, or epilogue, anything like that to keep the structure and organization. And then an appendix with new monsters, new or modified mechanics, new or unique magical items. And then, of course, if you're going to do a professional, like a professional product, you want your legal content, attribution, disclaimers, sources, tools, credits, that sort of thing. Maybe you need to credit the OGL. So this is just the kind of information that I uploaded so that it can be used throughout the content creation. So that's kind of important to have this stuff once you're ready to actually sit down and do something. Most people kind of do this on the fly, and I respect that, and that's kind of how I started. But then I started realizing that there's more potential and less work for me on the back end if I can get it to work. I don't always have faith in AI tools. Sometimes they really suck. They're really frustrating. So just let you know ahead of time that, don't expect perfection. It's still not quite there. It's a lot better, though, than a year ago. When I was doing this about 2024, it was super frustrating because it was kind of at that point where it works good, but then sometimes it doesn't. Now it's kind of leaning more towards working good or working well enough so you can kind of use it. If you guys want a specific type of like 5e adventure or a style, or you want something that's, maybe you're working on something related, but whatever it may be, I'm open to starting with your suggestion. So if you want a specific setting or a specific theme or genre, maybe fantasy, high fantasy, wilderness, I don't know. What do you guys prefer? I don't know if I'm going to get any feedback, but I was thinking about doing this Underdark adventure since I already kind of have an idea. But, if you guys have something that you want that's related to that, you can ask for it. But what I want to do is prompt the ChatGPT to create an outline or at least a starting point for an adventure. And I want to put that in the Fantasy Grounds. So I don't want to make it a big thing because then it takes too long and you've got a lot of stuff to cover. So maybe just a 3-part one-shot, where you go in, you do the thing, you discover, you fight the boss, and you're basically done. This is kind of based off the 5-room dungeon design approach. If you guys are new to this and new to writing adventures, you want to take a look at, do a search on Google for tabletop RPG best practices for adventure writing. And it'll give you examples of the types of adventures style formatting that works well. It's not a cover everything type deal, but it gives you an idea of structure and how adventures are formulated and how they're put together, so to speak. So that's kind of the approach that I have too. I kind of have my own way of doing it. I have this strange obsession with the number 3. So a lot of my adventures will be 3 chapters or 6 or 12 or 9. It just depends on the scope and how large the adventure is. So for a one-shot, I use three sections or 3 chapters. For a standard length adventure, 6 to 9, depending on what it is. And then for a campaign, I'll probably have 12 chapters. And then anything beyond that is probably just too much. So without further ado, I want to create an Underdark adventure in this case, unless someone else comes up with something more interesting. But basically, that's just going to be the biome. So I want to, let's see, create. I'm going to prompt this, create a one-shot adventure using my template. Using my template format. The theme is a, let's say, a smuggling ring that originates from a Dwergar outpost into a, we'll say, a settlement that is closer to the surface world, something like that. And so that's the, like the kind of like the basis of it, right? So that is going to kind of theme it. And so I'm hoping to get like some factions, maybe some bad guy, So I want to say create the big bad evil guy and the minions and sidekicks. Because I always like a bad guy that has like a lieutenant. And that way, what I'll do with that is, instead of painting myself into a corner, like if I want to use the big bad evil guy or the lieutenant later, you could just throw out one of those, those NPCs, and then maybe use one of them later. Like one of them survives or something goofy like that. But I like doing that just simply because I need an out. And I don't want to paint myself in the corner. Like, well, that guy supposedly died in the adventure. So I don't want that to be an issue. But either way, I like to have that. And then, of course, I like to have the minions. I'll say a pet and a sidekick. I'll say, instead of a sidekick, I'll say lieutenant. Oh, I spelled that wrong. There we go. Also create the factions, if any. Allow for horror, violence. I like combat, and hazards. Horrific. I want not horror like as in like horrific encounters. So I like kind of darker, evil, kind of more dingy type stuff. I'm not really as much into the fluff, although I did consider making kind of like a Feywild kind of like Easter adventure, but it just doesn't ring with me. I just feel like, I don't know, it feels like too childish, maybe. I don't know the word for it, but it's just not how I feel about adventuring anyways. So allow for horrific encounters, violence, and themed hazards for the Underdark. And I'll give it examples, such as claustrophobia. So if the adventures are not from the Underdark, they might get claustrophobic. I'll say scarce resources and lighting issues. So if they don't have dark vision, that can be an issue, because the minute you light a torch down there, it's almost like a beacon. It's kind of like, here I am. So not having vision or Underdark type adaptations, it can be really difficult. So I'll say include Dwergar, of course. What else do we want in here? A little bit of Drow. Got to have a little bit of that. I don't want too much focus on Drow. I think that happens way too much. I kind of want to focus more on the Dwergar. I'll say deep gnomes. And what else should be kind of included? I think that's good enough because this is going to be a short adventure. So if I do too many things, it will confuse the AI. So you got to kind of be careful with what you ask for, because the more complex it is, the more likely it's going to drift off topic eventually. Even though they've expanded the memory and such, if you want to do a large project, do it in chunks instead of one big prompt. This is supposed to be a short one shot, so I need to keep that in mind. I get too wrapped up in it, and these videos start becoming like 2 hours long, and some people don't like that. So anyways, deep gnomes and the appropriate ambient. See, this is an important thing that I think gets left out. Ambient Q. So what I'm looking for are things that are related, but they just add to the descriptions and such as smells, feel, hearing, and sight. So if you can't see underground, I don't think you should start with sight. I really think that smell, feel, hearing, those, probably hearing is the most common secondary one, but I want it to start with these other things first and then maybe go to sight, because you have to assume there are light sources or dark vision. And that's the thing that I think takes away from the kind of takes away from the immersion. But if you do it too much, then it becomes to the point where you can't even play. So you have to strike a balance of how much realism you want to put into a fantasy type game, because if you do it too much, then it goes the other way where it's like difficult for anyone to do anything because they don't have a light source, or because you're enforcing the world confines too much on your players in your game, and that could get frustrating and discouraging. So let's just see what it does here. But I do want to say name the NPCs and places with original and cool names, not generic, predictable, and silly names. I hate it when it does that. It just, it's cheesy. Use cool names for places and NPCs, not generic or predictable titles or names. So that's something that I noticed no matter what AI tool I use. For some weird reason, the training or whatever they did, it always has some really silly. There's once in a while it has a cool name, but it just, I don't know. I have to, a lot of times I have to go back and change them because they're just too generic or too silly or too predictable, or it's already been used in a product or something like that. So that irritates me a little bit. So let's just see what it does. So I gave it this is kind of a long prompt. I wouldn't recommend doing this much, a lot, because this right here is a lot to take in. Plus it has to consider the structure and how I want it and all that stuff. So there's quite a bit of quite a bit of preamble there, and you don't want to overwhelm the AI tool. And if you have to do something very big, you want to make sure that you do it in pieces. So if you're going to do a large adventure, I would do it a section at a time, or a chapter, instead of everything at once, because I think that's where the AI tools start to fall down. It was worse like a year ago. You had to do it almost by chapter. It was ridiculous. But now you can kind of do a lot bigger projects, but not too big. Like a one shot, it should be able to handle that. But once you get into a longer adventure with like 9 chapters or something, then you kind of want to do it in pieces. I think that's my best advice on that, because it'll start to hallucinate. It starts to forget. And once it starts doing that, it kind of goes down a path of no return. And then you have to go back and remind it and all that other stuff. So that's why I was excited when I saw that the memory was added or augmented in ChatGPT. Okay, so I'm kind of interested to see what was actually going to come out of this. Huh, interesting. It's already got different areas. There's a drow emissary. I already like it. There's some Dwergar smugglers, hazards. There's a read aloud section. This is exactly what I would like to see in an adventure. So if I was going to buy an adventure, I would definitely want to have, a format that's familiar and that's easy to follow. And it's not all over the place. Like, it depends. Like, if I was doing a sandbox type thing, then that wouldn't bother me as much. But if you're doing a one shot, you want a little bit of structure. And then, oh, cool, it even added this kind of legal content just in case. So let's see a look at what it's doing. So recommended levels 3 to 4, 4 to 5 players. So if that was the case, I would probably allow third level for 5 players or 4th level for 4 players. That way it kind of balances out the power of the group. Shadows beneath Dwergar's reach, or Drugar's reach. Huh. Okay. Story or lore. The Dwergar outpost, known as Varek Dol, has been infamous for its illegal trade in forbidden artifacts and exotic contraband, smuggling these illicit goods from deep within the Underdark to the surface adjacent settlement of Gloomwatch. The sinister Dwergar leader, Grolthak Ironscourge, so the names aren't bad, aided by his vicious lieutenant, Marula Whisperblade, and her monstrous pet, oversees operations ruthlessly. Dark rumors whisper of cooperation with Drow and Deep Gnome agents, a fragile alliance that threatens the tenuous balance of power. So the background says, that's just the lore. The background says Gloomwatch, nestled in a shadowed cavern near the surface, relies on trade with surface dwellers. Recent brutal attacks on trade caravans and disappearance have forced town elders to seek outside assistance. The players are hired to investigate and dismantle the smuggling ring rooted deep in the Underdark. I'm not too sure if I like that, but that's okay for now. The adventure. So Area 1, the Whispering Tunnels, DM info. So that's one section. And it says it's like a maze-like network haunted by claustrophobia-inducing tunnels and eerie whispers. Narrow passageways occasionally collapse, causing cave-ins. So I like that. The read aloud says, the cramped tunnels squeeze tighter with every step. Shadows flicker at the edges of your vision, and whispers in an unknown tongue echo eerily, distorting your senses. Not bad. I mean, that's kind of sounds like something you'd see in an adventure. And the aftermath says, successfully navigating the tunnels leads to the hidden entrance of Gloomwatch's underground marketplace. In Area 2, the Shadow Bazaar, a secret marketplace frequented by Dwergar, Deep Gnomes, and occasionally Drow. Marula Whisperblade's spies monitor this area. So then it gets into this NPC. He's a Deep Gnome informant, cautious but open to bribes or persuasion. There's some concealed pitfalls in the area, which I don't know if that makes sense or not yet. And then it says, read aloud, torchlight flickers weakly here, illuminating a secretive market bustling with shady figures bartering strange and dubious wares. So what I might do with that, since that's very vague, is I might ask for a table, a rollable list, I should say, for items that they might see. Now, this doesn't mean they can necessarily buy them, but to add flavor, I would definitely want to roll a table. Now, be careful when you make tables that offer stuff, because you got to make all that stuff in Fantasy Grounds if it's something unique. So you got to kind of watch that and make a store or like a small, make the items and then make like a storefront. So in case you want to allow your players to buy stuff, you're on for it to make the content if it's not standard stuff that's already in your campaign. So that's the only thing I don't like about doing that, is I paint myself into this corner where I have all this work to do. Because honestly, my idea of writing, for me anyways, I like the more creative aspect of it. I don't want to spend hours making tons of items. I don't mind making a few items, but I don't want to make 50 items just to have a store that most people hardly ever use. So there's a whole nother discussion, but if you want to make a store that you use in all your adventures, that might be one thing. But if it's a store just for this adventure, just for this one time, I don't think so. I'm not going to do all that work. So you have to kind of weigh your, what's your expectations versus your time you want to put into it and all that stuff. So pick your battles on that. So aftermath, players gain vital clues leading to the hidden smuggler pass and Marula's guard post. So then it goes to Marula's outpost information. She's a ruthless Dwergar assassin, and she's aided by her pet, an aberrant basilisk. I don't know if that's good. I like the look of it, but I think the basilisk is too big. I think it depends on the context, so I might change that. I don't like the pet. It's a monstrous pet. I don't mind her having a pet. It's just the fact that it's a big basilisk, unless she rides it or something. That might be something. So rather than a pet, maybe it's her mount and pet, So that would be cool if she rode on top of it. But it seems a little bit overpowered, and I don't think it fits very well with the adventure. I think it's too much. So I might need to rein that in. Maybe make it something smaller. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say change the, we'll say pet into something smaller and more manageable, because I don't want it, that's like as big as one of the tunnels. I don't know. It just, unless it's a young, a young creature or something. I don't know. I don't see it. Also, add in a rollable list for potential wares and such for the market. But I need to define how many results I want. So I'll also add in a 8 result, so a D8. So I only want 8 results. You start getting beyond like 10, 12, then you're kind of on for it to create a bunch of stuff. I don't want to build a store right now. I just want to have the flavor, more or less. And if I need to create a couple items that lend themselves to the adventure, then I'll do that. But in the case of this one shot, there's not going to be a whole lot of time and room for bartering and trade. So it's more or less, what do they see in the market? Not so much, oh, you can buy all this stuff. Because half the stuff is contraband anyways, and I don't know if I want to mess with taking all that time. So anyways, I'm going to change the pet into something smaller and more manageable. Also add in an 8 result rollable list for potential wares and such for the shadow market, I guess. We'll see what it does. But as you can see, this is when you start getting picky and you start refining the work. So this is like your next step. So after you get your outline, well, first you did all your resources, then you did your outline, and then you start refining it. And that could be anything from changing names to adding and taking things away. You can add it to add a little bit more. So you might want a little bit more substance to it. You know, you could do that. Maybe I might add in some dialogue options in case, but they need to be related to a kind of like either a random, not a random encounter, but like a kind of like a encounter that you would, that you would use to give information. So any information brokers or quest givers, and then of course like maybe your final battle or something. That's kind of what I mean for the dialogue options, and those are only just there for flavor. And if the GM has a bad day and they can't think of stuff on the fly, they have something to work with, so he doesn't have to use those. Okay, so the pet's more manageable. It was updated to a shadow mastiff, which I think is cool. And then there's some potential wearers at the Shadow Bazaar. Now it's saying you have 5 responses from ChatGPT 4.5 remaining. If you hit the limit, responses will switch to another model until it resets April 19th, 2025. So now it's saying get Pro. I'm not going to get Pro. That's like $200 or something like that. So I don't care. I got most of what I need here. 5 responses is good enough for me. So I got most of what I need here. So now I'm going to make the rest of my responses or requests a little bit more, how should I say, important, or make sure that they mean something. So this is kind of what I was saying, like you're running out of iterations after a while, and 4.5 is the latest and greatest. And the reason I picked that model is because it does have more writing qualities to it as opposed to the standard model. So that's why I used 4.5. And it kind of has a better writing approach, I guess. It's about the best way I can explain it. And if I get really pissed off, I'll just copy and paste this entire thing into Grok and use that. So I'm not too worried about the limit, but you'll run into that occasionally if you're doing too many requests. Like, don't put in a request to change one simple name, but put in a request that covers multiple things. That way, you're killing more birds with one stone instead of one little change at a time. Because when you do that, it kind of wastes and it's rewriting it and you waste a lot of time doing that. So take note of all the changes that you want to make and do it at once. So I probably should have asked it to add the dialogue and to add whatever I wanted to change in this last one I just did. So that's the other thing about being organized and such, is that you might miss out on your iterations or the limit. You might hit the limitations if you are asking the AI tool to keep changing it for one little thing. A name change is not worth all the rewrite. You can always change that in Fantasy Grounds or however you want to do it. So what I want to do is, I'm going to say, please add a few dialogue options for rumors. So that would be a rollable list of, we'll just say 6 results. So you don't need too many. I think that's fine. And then I will say, and for quest givers or the main NPCs. So that's going to give us some dialogue options encased. Trying to think of what else I want it to change, because I don't want to just do that. Oh, generate the NPC stat blocks based on my template for this adventure. Use the formatting and text layout as the template. Okay, so I wanted to make the NPCs. I wanted to add another table of rumors and then add a little bit of dialogue options for the NPCs that are important or quest givers, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and hit have it hit that and see what we get out of there. So as you can see, this process can take a long time. And just when you prompt it, make sure you have enough substance to it, not just one little name change. Or maybe you don't like the spelling of it or something like that. It's generally not worth it. I would save that and go make a note of it somewhere or mentally, and then go back and ask for your changes, but ask for more than one, maybe a few changes, depending on what they are. But this is kind of cool. So yeah, so here's the rollable list, rumors and dialogue. So here's our 1d6 results. Here's the rumor. Then the quest giver, Gloomwatch, Elder of Errance, as our caravans vanish and our people live in fear. You must uncover and stop whoever's behind these sinister acts. Velnik, the informant, might say, information comes at a price, friends. Maybe we can strike a deal. And Zephyrin Shroudvel says, our interests may align temporarily. Be careful whom you trust. So you insert the stat blocks below, following the provided template, and it looks like it did not. It did not follow my format. You got these, what do you call it? These indentations. So this is what I'm saying. This is the type of stuff that you're going to come across, and I don't want any of the formatting that it did. So this is the irritating part. Like, I didn't ask for indentations, and when I started this conversation, I asked it to use plain text. So I didn't want this. So that's the kind of thing that you're going to come across. You'll have to live with it, but I can ask it to redo it and remove all that, but that's just going to take away what little of the limitations that I have, and I don't even know if this format is correct. So it looks like it. You take out these things here, but see, it put a colon here. That's going to break in the NPC import tool, and these indentations here are these bullet points. So what I might do, since I'm here, and I don't really care at this point, is I'm going to say, this is what I would not do, but I'm going to do it for the sake of the show. So remove the bullet points and follow the NPC template provided in this project. Actions do not get semicolons. So the formatting must be maintained. So this is kind of like my griping of using AI tools, because I don't know where it gets that or why it would change it all of a sudden, but anyways. I get it from Glock. I've done it in different things. It does the same thing. Semicolons. And what I'm going to do actually is give it the text. Because what I always have noticed with ChatGPT is that it doesn't follow your script or whatever exactly the way you want it. So I'm going to look for So this is the format that I gave it. This is very simple. Look at that. Do you see any colons in there? No. So this is the actual formatting that I want to use. So I'm going to go back into the ChatGPT like this. Sometimes you have to remind it, and this is where you lose iterations, because I don't want to have to retype all that out or fix it. So let's do that. We'll see what it comes up with. But now what do I got? 3 iterations left. So I want to save those for something more important, like more content or something. But what I'm going to do is start a different conversation once I have a closer, approximate, kind of approximation of what I'd like the adventure to be like, and then go from there. Let me see what it did. Yeah, it tried to fix it, but we'll see what it does. I hope it does, because it really is not necessary to have all the extra formatting. I didn't ask for it, so I don't know why it's doing that. So far, it looks right. Okay, so these are the 2 stat blocks. There's a Shadow Mastiff. Okay, so it kind of went back and fixed those. But nonetheless, that is what you're going to find in a lot of cases when you want some kind of, result. And again, I was saying earlier, it's really difficult to control. So that's something you're going to have to fight with. It says, okay, the NPC stat blocks have been reformatted precisely to match your provided template, removing bullet points and adhering to the required style. Let me know if you need anything else, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit this copy button. And what we can do is one of 2 things. So what I might do is put it in Notepad++, just so I have a copy of it. So I'll take this and just dump it all in here. And this way you can look at the formatting, and then you can also see the amount of information and all that. So this doesn't look too bad, although it does look rather vague. So I don't know what it's doing, but it seems like it didn't actually write the adventure. Interesting. So what I'm going to, it gives me some stuff here, but it's not really written the entire adventure. So that's interesting. So you got the story, the background, the adventure. It's almost like it just cut those things out instead of keeping. Let me see what else we got here. Yeah, so with that in mind, this is the thing I got frustrated with ChatGPT in the story mode. And then you're facing a wall here. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to Grok here and go into Grok itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, please fix, update, expand, and so this is the kind of thing I'll do if I get desperate and I need to. And I don't like Drugar's reach, and change Drugar's reach to a different name or title. So I won't have as many limitations here. And I'll say, write the adventure from the, because it's more like an outline. Keep the formatting simple and plain. No HTML or markup. I don't want all that fancy. We can do that later in Fantasy Grounds. I don't know why it does that all the time, but it tries to, regardless of the AI tool. So this looks right. This rumor table looks right. Okay, we got the dialogue, got the NPC stat block. So we got the important stuff here. So what I want to do is go back to ChatGPT and close this. And see, now this is a sub, kind of like a sub thing here. So if I wanted to go back, I'm going to say this. I want to take this initial prompt, and what I want to do is give this the context of the adventure so that it has some more context as to what I'm looking for. So again, I'm using Grok. So this is something that you might have to employ, especially if you're really desperate, and you need to get something done. I should have probably stayed with Grok 3. So my initial thing is, yes, ChatGPT 4.5 is more powerful. It does show that it can write better, but the way it does the output and the fact that it didn't exactly write the adventure and that sort of thing, it kind of irritates me. So I will not be using ChatGPT in the future for a while. And also coming up against those limitations was annoying. Okay, so this is a one-shot too. I have to remember that. So I kind of get wrapped up and I got this big, huge adventure, but really it's not. So this would probably just take like 1 or 2 maps and then some imagery. So what I want to do with this is I want to copy this information, and then I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, but I'm going to start a new conversation. Oops. Let's see, OpenAI. And instead of using 4.0, I'm just going to use 4. And I will say, create a detailed fantasy cover montage, because I kind of want a blended image montage of the adventure from the context above, but with dark fantasy themes and the title. What is the new title? I forgot. Veins of, okay, here we go. See, I like that better. And I put these in quotes so it knows what I'm talking about, and it'll say, and I'll just say an adventure for 5e. We'll see what it does. It may do something cool, maybe not. Lately, it's the art part of ChatGPT is a little bit better. So I could have done this in Grok, but I don't like, or I don't appreciate Grok's artistic ability as opposed to Ideogram or even the new ChatGPT, just because of the capabilities. So you might find yourself bouncing around between different AI tools if you're not getting the results that you want. And as you can see how I got discouraged real quick, because I know that once you start going down that path, it just gets worse and worse. The tools end up kind of forgetting what you were talking about, and they start exaggerating, and they just do what they want. And that's when it's time to call it quits, when it starts doing that. It's either time to start over or make it in smaller pieces. So maybe I should have done the adventure and then did all the NPCs and then did all the tables instead of trying to do it all in one thing, because I think that's where a lot of us go wrong when it comes to creating content. And you got to remember the training and the data that it's pulling from may or may not be live. Whereas I noticed that Grok actually accesses live tool or live information, and sometimes ChatGPT does not. And I'm not sure why that's the case, but it just depends on the version you're using and all that stuff. So this is pretty cool, actually. So I like that style, right? This is really good. I can work with that. So what I want to do is create NPC pogs for all of the creatures, NPCs, and hazards. We'll see what it can do with that. Using the same style as above. So this is where I think the tools help more. This ChatGPT right now is just more useful for this style of art as opposed to a highly refined digital style. So if you want more of the storybook kind of fantasy role-playing style, you can do that pretty well now. I do like the way this looks. It's pretty good. I'm not saying it's the best, but I like all these little cracks in the text. They've improved the text capability, by the way, for ChatGPT. So I kind of like that. But I don't like Grok for some reason for the images because it just sucks. It's not quite there yet. But I'm sure this is like a race. Like every time I turn around, one or more of the AI tools have changed or got better or got worse or whatever. I don't even use Midjourney anymore. I used to use Midjourney a lot, but I don't use it anymore. So it really kind of comes down to what your needs are and your process and what you're trying to do. All right, so there's Thurrock Bloodforge. So what I would do with this is cut out this background. And I'll just say create the next pog for another NPC. So that's kind of cool. I like how that turned out, that style. I would totally use that. And it's kind of more like the pencil illustrated style as opposed to the really digital 3D kind of look. I do like that look, but not for this adventure. I like it more gritty, more natural, more tabletop feeling, and less video game. So that's kind of cool. So bravo on that. So at least the images are better in what used to be a really horrific kind of not so good. I don't know. It just wasn't as good before. We'll see what happens. So if you guys have any questions or comments or gripes or whatever, you guys are welcome to do so. I'm actually live on YouTube. I can't see the chat from the other platforms, but if you want to leave me a hate mail or something like that, it's fine. So here is Silzara Voidsinger. Let's see what this looks like. Looks like a female drow of some sort. Pretty cool. So I'm just going to be sitting here iterating this. So what I'll do is I'll take these images, all of them, and put them as a kind of like a collage. And then I'll put these in, like for instance, I'll go to copy the image and I'll go into Canva or something like that. And we're going to create this. This particular size is 1080 by 1080. So what I might do is edit. So this only has to be, the recommended size is like 256 by 256. So what I might do is, change the dimensions. But for the time being, I'm going to, here's background remover. So I might see I do something like that. And then what I'll do is I'll render them in this format, and then I'll take and do all of them, and then I'll put those into Fantasy Grounds as tokens. So that's kind of the cool part of that, I guess. But it's not always that fun. I mean, sometimes it's annoying. Okay, here's the Cavern Wraith. Well, that's pretty eerie looking. I'm gonna want it to create the Shadow Mastiff. All right, so I think that's about all I wanted to share at this time. I mean, I would want to go into the process of building it in Fantasy Grounds, but really the first half of doing this is to get the right tools, get your sources, get all the artwork done. You know, try to get most of that knocked out in the beginning, and then, you know, like I said, you're going to go through struggles and you're going to get pissed off, but it will pay off in the end. I think this, if I wasn't talking and I was actually focusing and doing all that, I think I would probably have this done in, I don't know, total hours, maybe 8 hours. I can have a really nice polished adventure. And that means working an hour or two during the week. So I probably can have it done in a week, you know, counting my work hours and stuff. So, and what's going on in my home. But I think, you know, 6 to 8 hours of work for a one-shot adventure is a little bit much. However, you know, if you're someone who likes to create, it doesn't feel as wasted. If you're in a big hurry, I wouldn't recommend it. So all of these images here, I definitely would use this. So this is a, oops, I didn't mean to do that. So like the Shadow Mastiff. And then I'd use a background remover. And then I would title these. So when they render out of Canva, they don't, you know, you won't have problems. So I'll just say, I don't remember his name, but for right now, I'll just put Duergar. So this is just, you know, preliminary steps that I would go through. Let's see, the Cavern Wraith, that one's really cool. Yeah, so I can do this all day. This is kind of fun. This is the fun part, you know, making the tokens and stuff, but it's not always the fun part. It can get really frustrating. So again, background remover, I'll say Cavern Wraith. Click on that, go to background remover. So this won't take too long to do the tokens. Sometimes it takes forever. But I do like that you can just cut the background out, and I like that they're kind of dark. I might lighten them up a tiny bit, because when they're on the screen, like especially if you're streaming or you're sharing them to your friends, depending on the resolution of their monitor and the size, these might be very hard to see. So I might just lighten them up a tad, but I do like the dark grittiness, kind of the sketch look to it. That's pretty cool. So that I can work with that. So that's a pretty cool. I like how that turned out. So this is Zilzara Voidsinger. So as far as ChatGPT goes, I think it's okay. It's definitely increased its value a little, but it's not perfect, you know, and I just rather use a different tool still, because it hasn't quite improved enough for me. And I can already tell, like, the direction it was going is so familiar and so annoying that I definitely, I don't know. Like I said, I use it for an outline, and then I put it in something else and do something else with it. I don't stick with just one tool, because I know that some have strengths and weaknesses that are above and beyond what I care to deal with. Just put it that way. But anyways, this is just an example, use cases for creating content for your games. If you really want something, you know, more dynamic and more artistic and all that stuff, you're going to have to put more effort into it, and you're going to have to put more time into it. So that, like I said, that adventure from top to bottom with artwork, tokens, a map, you know, that sort of thing, probably, like I said, about 6 hours, maybe 8, depending. Oh, you know what I want to do? I want to say create a stylistic regional map of the locations and landmarks for the adventure above using the same style of art. So I want it to create kind of like a this is nice. I'll just say a regional map. I don't want stylistic. I'll say a themed Underdark. I'll just say a themed regional map. So this would be a map that I would use that is not a battle map. This is more or less like just reference, like more for immersion, not so much gameplay. Like I might use it, like put the party token for the adventures, and then move that around on the map or something. But and then use like the mask, the mask overlay, or use lighting and then tone down the radius of the lighting so they can only see a certain amount of map at one time. And being that you're in the Underdark, that would make more sense. Make the limitations of the party token, kind of more evident. I do like how the cover turned out. I don't know if I'd necessarily use it, but it looks pretty cool. I like that. So I'd probably use that like in the beginning. And then all these NPCs, I would probably sprinkle those throughout. And I could actually make a collage of all the NPCs, all the different images, and then put it back into ChatGPT and have it make a new image that includes all those elements. So there's a lot of things you can do. Claustrophobia, Dusk Cradle, Ilzara's Cache. So that's kind of cool. I mean, it kind of gives you just like a little space here. What I might do is say create a textured top-down view of an Underdark tunnel with natural underground features, but from above as a drone view. See, I didn't say anything about map. And that's kind of what you have to do, because if you say map, it's going to try to make a map and it's going to suck. But, and not always, but usually it sucks. From above as a drone view. We'll see. So this would be like something I could use. Just throw this down, put a little bit of line of sight on it, and call it good. So nothing too complex, right? Because the more complexity and the more stuff you have, the more likely one of your players might experience some sort of lag. So I don't want to have this huge, maps that are high definition and all those animated stuff. That's when it starts getting into video game, and then also you can have performance issues. So even if it works well on your system, it may not work on one or two of your players' systems so well. So I try to limit how much content I put at a time in my sessions, so that way it's smoother, and you're kind of making up for the weakest link, I guess. Okay, so yeah, you might use something like this, but it doesn't have enough. I like the texture; it's really cool. So I do like that, but let me see. I'm gonna say create another image like, or I'll say with the same art style and textured top-down view of an Underdark tunnel and a drone view. I'll say Underdark with natural tunnel with a center chamber and with natural underground. Okay, so I might use this image, and then the next image I might use for the battle. Like maybe you would use this one for the hazards, and then maybe use the next scene or the next image for, for your thing. So this would work, right? This is just a tile. And I like the texture of it. And putting line of sight on this would be very simple. It wouldn't take a bunch of memory, and you can add assets if you need to, like little decorations, or maybe you can use a little bit of animated like dust or something like that, but you wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel, in other words. There we go. I like this because it has this ledge up here. Yeah, that's cool. So I could get away with something like that. And you see what I did here. I didn't say map, because as soon as you say that, it's going to put a grid on it. It's going to put a frickin' compass and all kinds of crap on there. So you just got to keep it really simple and just focus on what you're needing it for. So this would be like for battle. It's not a very big area. So what I might do is, since I don't have a grid on it, I would scale this down to where, or scale this up, where this is actually really big, like at least 30 feet in diameter or something like that. So we'll see. Anyway, folks, I hope that helps a little. I'm kind of getting into the rambling off-topic stage, but anyways, I think that I gave you an impression or an idea, and you'll have to go from there and make it your own, and also use different tools. Don't, paint yourself into a corner. So you guys take care, have and enjoy the rest of your weekend. And if you're so inclined, you can follow us, you can donate, you can join our community, and of course, you can use Fantasy Grounds to run your games.